Welcome to Better Relationships, Better Work, where we explore how to make work better through the power of relationships. My name's Jason Lauritsen. I'm the author of two books, a leadership trainer and speaker on a mission to fix how we treat people at work. Thank you for being here today. In this episode, we're going to do something a little different. This is a solo episode, so you are stuck with me for the duration of this. Unlike the previous 13 episodes where I have conversations to explore what we can learn from individuals' personal relationships and bring that to work, I thought we're at a point that it's worth checking in. I wanted to stop and maybe do a few things with you today. So what's going to happen in this episode is I wanted to quickly check in on why this podcast exists, why I think these conversations and this work is really important. I also want to share a resource with you that I think will be really valuable should you be interested in taking the invitation to use it, to set aside a little time for reflection and dive in. And then I'm going to share some of what I am learning or some of the lessons that I can extract from some of my personal relationships, and share those with you and see what we can pull out of that for work. Because it only seemed fair it's super fun for me to be on the interviewing end of these conversations with all of my great guests about their relationship experience. But it only seems fair once in a while to turn the lens around, right, and put it on me and talk about my own relationships. And so that's what we're going to do today. So I want to start, I guess, with just quickly revisiting, at least revisiting for me, maybe not for you. Maybe this is the first time you are hearing me talk about this if you are new to the podcast. Why better relationships, better work? And I think the biggest thing for me is that this is my work, right? This is the work that I do every day, the things I think about every day. So it feels like just an extension of what I do, but more specifically, why dive into people's personal relationships and look for lessons and look for insights and look for techniques and tips that we can then maybe think about how to pull that back into work. What is that about exactly? And for one, I think on a macro level, because I've spent the last 25 years of my career working on how to make work better for human beings, how to create a work experience where people can show up to their job, whatever that means, whatever that looks like, have a fulfilling and enriching experience that invites them and encourages them to then give their best so that the organization can accomplish its goals. In that 25-year journey of trying to do that work and understand what really matters, at the end of the day, for me, it all boils down to one word, and that word is relationship. Because what I discovered along the way is at sort of the highest level, employees experience work as a relationship. We Every day when we're working, we want our work to feel like a healthy relationship. We want to feel valued and trusted and cared for and appreciated and accepted and all of the things that we want in any kind of important, healthy relationship in our life. We really want that out of work. And so the work relationship has to be healthy on that level, our relationship with work generally. But then even within that are all of these other relationships that influence and affect that broader work relationship, our relationship with our manager and other leaders in the organization, our relationship with our peers. And when those relationships are positive, we feel better about work. We actually do better work. There's all kinds of evidence to suggest that is the case. And on the flip side of that, what I would argue is that almost every one of the issues that I run into that are workplace issues that, we struggle with or wrestle with can be boiled down to, at its very foundation where the real issue lives. If you dig in far enough, almost every issue we face is a relationship issue. It's a lack of feeling valued. It is a lack of trust or broken trust. It is an inability to create clarity about expectations or accountability. It's an inability to have conversations that actually matter, right? To have real conversations. It's an inability to step into conflict in a way that is healthy and positive. All of that is relationship, is about the relationship. And all of that requires that we build relationship skills. And so that's part of the reason that I'm so bullish about us being curious and relentless learners about what makes relationships work, because it is vital that we understand those things and that we be looking for answers and looking for solutions to bring to work. But here's the bigger, I think, the bigger thing that I have been feeling lately is that while all of this is true about work, and that work, when it's not working, and it's not working in a lot of places, is because of a lack of relationship and our inability to, or lack of skill in how to build relationships, we have a bigger relationship issue. I mean, if we zoom out, right, there's data telling us at a societal level, we have things like, we have a loneliness epidemic going on. The data there is pretty staggering. We have a mental health crisis that really comes back to, I think, in a lot of ways, a lack of connection, if you kind of dig in on that. And we're against kind of an insidious enemy in social media, because social media is fueled by our disconnection, right? The more disconnected we are, the more polarized we are, the better social media tends to do. So there's no interest in healing that. And so they're going to continue to feed that and ensure that we stay as disconnected as we can. And the same thing is happening to our children. And you think about that and the lasting impact that can have, right? There's some really scary things happening broadly. And I mean, if you go looking for the data, you will find it. It's sort of everywhere. I mean, the Surgeon General just this week, the week I'm recording this, came out, and the Surgeon General of the US came out and said that social media should have a warning label on it, like cigarettes do, for the potential harm or damage that it can do to teens or children. That is pretty heavy stuff. And so we have all this stuff going on at a broader level. We are disconnected, out of relationship at a broader level. And so that's another reason that I love this particular work, sort of blending the conversation about the personal relationships with the work relationship, and really getting into the fact that these skills, these relationship dynamics, are the same no matter what. They're the same in both contexts. And what if, and this is the dream that I think about, the thing that fuels me to keep doing this work is, what if we were bold, we were innovative, we were visionary, and we started really teaching people, not just leaders, not just managers, but all employees, how to do relationships better? What if we started developing and modeling better relationship skills at work? What if we had literal training courses or offerings for employees around how to be in better relationships with other humans? Well, I'll tell you what if. The what if of on the other side of that, right? The outcome would be, number one, all of the things that we're trying to do and accomplish at work would improve. You think about it, the easy, obvious one is well-being, mental health, all of that improves. We start building better relationships, that starts to improve at work. Connection is at the heart of that. Productivity improves, innovation improves, performance improves. Everything we care about, retention improves. I mean, at a very selfish level, if we have, better connections and friends at work, we also enjoy. There's data that says we enjoy work, right? We're just more satisfied generally at work if we have some connections at work and relationships. So that's pretty awesome, right? There's ROI all over that. But I think more importantly than that, when we teach people better relationships at work, they don't only use them at work. I see this all the time in my work when I teach a relationship skill or an approach, or the one that I'm most commonly talking about lately is this simple check-in process, the simple 4-step check-in conversation process that people will take it. I'm teaching it in the context of work, but they'll take it and they'll use it with their spouse or with their friend or with somebody in an Uber, right? Their Uber driver, and they end up in these incredible conversations that have real impact for them, that have real consequence. And so we live in a world that's starved for connection. We live in a world where we desperately need relationship. Like relationship and connection is what can heal us. It's what can reverse the tides of polarization. It's the thing that can help bring us back together. We need those skills. What if the workplace could be the place that starts to give us those things? I believe that work could heal the world. Work could begin to heal society if we're brave enough to seize the opportunity. So that's why I think this work matters. And I'm really honored and I feel privileged that you are here with me on this journey. We need all hands on deck to do this. This is something that matters very deeply and I think is the work. I don't know that there's more important work in front of us as organizational leaders than this, figuring out how to restore, how to foster, how to invest in, how to build relationships and relationship at scale in our workplace. And if we do that, I think we can have tremendous impact. So that's why I've been doing this work. That's why I launched this podcast, was to try to get at this conversation in a different way through these personal conversations with, thus far, my friends and colleagues and those who are really thoughtful and interesting and have some really cool perspectives about relationships. So if you've been following the podcast or if you've sampled a few of the episodes, you know that I tend to follow kind of a general framework, kind of the overarching conversation that we have together tends to be that I ask the guest to, we talk about a personal relationship that they have that's really healthy, and we kind of try to dig in and understand what makes that relationship work, and we try to find a lesson or two or an insight or two that we can then take and later apply that or try to bring it into the work relationship or the work environment and see how that looks. I also asked them to think about a work relationship that they have, a personal relationship with someone that was, built through work, and then we dig into that one as well. And then we, again, try to pull that into work. But one of the things you maybe don't know or don't see is that I, of course, in advance of those conversations, I send these, my guests, the questions. I give them kind of a list of questions for them to reflect on and to think about. And many of them, maybe not all of them, but many of them have said to me that the exercise of going through that reflection was incredibly helpful for them. It was incredibly insightful. It has led them to some ahas or some decisions or some insights about, I need to do this, or I really want to do more of that, or this really got me reflecting about this. And so I reached out to that person, or they were so excited after doing the reflection and having the conversation to share the conversation with this friend or the person they talked about, because it really helped them sort of uncover what was so important about that relationship and why it works. And they're learning as they're going. And so early on, one of my guests, the amazing Rebecca Ryan, said to me, like, you should really put this reflection, these questions that you're asking us to do in advance of these conversations, you should make that available to your audience so that if they want to do this work, if they want to kind of mine their own experiences for some insights and really do a little reflection, they can do that. And so I just wanted to let you know, or maybe remind you, that I have done that, that there is a link to this reflection, this worksheet. It's a form you can click on and go into and fill out. Doesn't take, it takes as long as it takes, depending on how reflective you want to be. But the questions are there, just there as a resource for you. I would encourage you, it's a great Saturday, Sunday morning kind of exercise. If you get up, if you have a busy big family household and it's quiet in the mornings, whenever it's quiet, sit down with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea or whatever it is your favorite beverage in the morning, do some reflection. Or if you're maybe you have quiet time in the evening, sit down and do some reflection. But it's there. I would invite you to take advantage of it. And I would love to hear from you if you have some really interesting insights or breakthroughs on that. So that was the resource I mentioned that I wanted to share with you, kind of an invitation to do some of this work yourself. All right. So now let's turn the lens. As I mentioned earlier, I've gotten to have 13 awesome conversations with folks about their relationships, and I felt like, I need to probably do some of this reflection for myself. And I'm often thinking about these things because of the nature of the work that I do, but it only seemed fair to kind of pause and share some of the things I've been thinking about or things I'm learning from my own experience that maybe would be helpful to you as well. And so I have a couple for you today that I would like to share. And these are sort of the bigger, I guess, things that seems to me I've been talking about these lately, or at least they've been coming up in conversations with others as we talk about what's going on around connection. And the first one is one that I was a little, I'll be honest, I was a little caught off guard. This isn't about a specific relationship that I had. It's not with an individual, but it's more so a reflection of kind of how I was showing up in the world or how I was traveling the world. And I'm trying to remember what it was exactly that started me thinking about this. But I began to notice that when I was out in the world, whether that be at the store or walking the dog or whatever, any place that I might encounter other humans, that I was really going out of my way not to make any sort of contact with them, right? Not to make any sort of accidental connection or invite any kind of interaction. And as someone who is in the relationship business and the connection business and whatever, like that didn't feel quite right to me, right? I'm like, why, how did this happen? And so, because I felt very isolated, I started to notice that I felt very much like I was kind of putting on a shield or putting a bubble around me. It was like, if you remember during the pandemic, kind of putting your mask on that covered most of your face. It was like I was putting sort of a almost an invisible mask on over my entire kind of body to not be seen by anyone else. And it was a very weird realization for me to have. And so I started to reflect, and I think for me, what I realized is, I mean, I'd love to blame it on the pandemic, right? Because that's the popular thing to do. We blame everything on the pandemic these days, but I don't think I can blame it only on the pandemic, because I think for me, it started actually when I was doing my kind of largest amount of business travel. So I'm in the airport by myself. And when I was doing a lot of that, you're around people, you start to, especially if you get tired or you're on the road too much, people are kind of impediments of you getting from point A to point B, from gate 1 to gate 2 to get on the next airplane. And I found that I could sort of put or developed kind of a way of floating through or navigating through airports and through cities where it was almost as if I could be invisible. I could move through an airport without ever accidentally, interacting with anyone or seeing anyone or making eye contact with anyone. I mean, even I go to buy some lunch from a store and I'm interacting with a clerk. It's almost like we're two computers having some kind of non-human interaction. And I think that's where it started. And then the pandemic hit and, everything was unsafe. And now it was like imperative to keep distance from others. And we were wearing masks and we were like, it just became almost protective. Other human beings represented threat there for a while, danger in a very real way. And so safety was about having that distance and that shield. And so I didn't realize I had built up all this armor around me. I don't think I was noticing it. And when I did start to notice it, I realized I didn't like how it felt. And so I decided I wanted to do something about that. I wanted to try showing up in the world differently. And so I started experimenting with how to show up and be more available to connection. Little things like, when I go to the store, just kind of lifting my eyes and actually looking around and noticing the other human beings that are occupying the same space. It is, if someone is walking, or if I'm out walking the dog and I see people, like looking at them and smiling and saying hello, right? Just simple things like that, that sound so silly right now. But that's where it started. Just little things like that, opening myself up. And then that started to have an impact in kind of how I started to show up everywhere, because I noticed that when I did that, I had these little random interactions with people. Like when I had these little, like I'd make eye contact and smile, and then somebody would speak to me, and then I would, end up having this little short conversation with somebody on the sidewalk or at the store when we were waiting to check out, or, waiting in line to board an airplane, whatever it is. And boy, those little moments, it was amazing. It felt like we were energizing each other, right? That moment of connection. It was like neither one of us were taking energy from one another. We were like giving energy to one another. Now, so that was interesting to me. Things started feeling very different. And what I noticed is the more that I started doing that, or making myself open to connection, I noticed I'm starting to get a different reaction from the world. I started feeling different. I started feeling more energized. But the other thing that was really interesting is the world started feeling different to me. It started feeling more friendly. It started feeling more warm in a different kind of way. And so it was really powerful. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that like I'm now the guy that sits down in the airplane and wants to like engage in a conversation with a stranger, for the next 3 hours on a plane. Like I still kind of have work to do, whatever. Like I'm not going to tell you that I'm like I've gone completely from one end of the spectrum to the other, but and if that's you, God bless, right? Like everybody teach their own, but I am at least trying to be a lot more open to connecting to folks and being available and sending positive energy out. And this was as I reflected on this, the funny thing for me is that you may or may not know this, but my first book that I published was I co-wrote a book with my friend Joe Gerstant. We published in 2012. It was called Social Gravity: Harnessing the Natural Laws of Relationships. And in that book, we after doing all of our research and all of our exploration, we basically put forth that there are 6 laws of social gravity. These things that, if you do them, they kind of help you draw relationships into your life, the kind of relationships that you want, the kind of relationships that help you get the things you want, whether that's happiness or success or well-being or whatever. One of the laws is be open to connection. So the irony of this is not lost on me, that literally wrote a book on this. There was a chapter in the book about this very thing. Now, granted, maybe it was a little different context when we were talking about it, but it doesn't change that the lesson, the law is the same. You cannot build connection if you are not open to it, if you are not inviting it. If the gates are closed, nobody's coming in. If you have armor built around you, then people can feel that. That's the vibe I was putting off, and people were responding to that appropriately. I put off a different vibe now, show up differently, and people respond to that differently and appropriately. So it's a choice. And so what does that mean in terms of lessons? I think what I'm recognizing is that I have to be really intentional and purposeful about being more present in all of my interactions. Part of that has been bringing a different kind of curiosity as I'm traveling through the world. Like, when I am flying now in the airports, I am observing the like incredible diversity of human beings that are in the same space around me and all of the energy and things that are happening. It's really interesting. And that curiosity alone helps me stay present and more available just to, even just the energy around me and sort of being able to participate in that. I also am trying to be intentional about being just generally more positive, sending or offering a more positive spirit and friendly spirit when I am anywhere, going out of my way to be nice and say thank you and talk to people and smile and just sort of do that, which, right, something that, it's a lesson I guess I had to learn for the whatever 15th time in my life, but it feels good. And the more I do it, the better I feel and the better the world feels. So that's lesson number one for me. And we'll come back to this in a minute in terms of how we apply that to work. That's one thing that's happening for me. The second thing that I wanted to share is born out of one of the prompts, actually, that I ask my guests to reflect on prior to joining the podcast. And it's become one of my favorite questions, actually, to ask people is, what is a lesson that you learned about relationships growing up as a child that still affects how you think about or approach relationships today? And for me, as I think about that, one of the things that I learned growing up was that if you want to have a lot of friends, and my parents had a lot of they had a lot of friends in the community. They knew a lot of people. They had a lot of couples that they did things with. They had groups of people they did things with. They were very socially connected. They had a broad kind of community of friendships and relationships. And what I came to notice or understand was that they really invested time. They invested effort in building those relationships, in making time to be with people. We were always hosting people for dinner at our house. People were coming over for dinner, or people were, they hosted card parties at our house. We were always hosting holiday things at our house with family members and friends. There was always stuff like they were, and hosting is no small thing. Particularly, my mom is the kind of person where the house has to be immaculately clean before people come over. And so when we were hosting, like there was real work to be done, not only getting clean, but she was an amazing cook. So she made great food and all the things. She was a, master in hospitality. And so it was a lot of work. And so there was a lot of energy that went into that. And I also remember them having conversations at times about, particular friends that, like maybe they had invited them over to the house many times, but they never get invited to the other family's house or the other couple's house. They're never hosted somewhere. And I remember hearing them or overhearing them having conversations over the years about that. And I think occasionally they would be like, gosh, like this is very one-sided. I mean, we've had them over here. How many times we haven't been invited over there? And so, once in a while, I think they would take a pause, but eventually they would, I think, realize that they like spending time with people. And if what they needed to do was be the one that invited or hosted to have that relationship, that's often what they did. And so it was investing in relationships. And as I got older, as I've gotten into my adult life, what I've realized is, yes, you have to invest in relationships. You have to make time. You have to be committed to those relationships, right? Being in those relationships. But you also, I think, as important is that you have to be willing to make the move, to take action, to be the one that does something to facilitate that connection happening, to make the connection with the other person, to get together, whatever that looks like. And so like an example for me was, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, I remember, and I think actually I might have read an article. I think there was a period in time where there were several kind of national pieces that were written about how, one of the loneliest cohorts of people, when they were measuring kind of loneliness generally by demographic categories and whatever, was middle-aged suburban dads. And I found that that hit a little close to home, right? Because that was me. And I was reading about kind of what happens and how, it was the dynamics of how life kind of comes along. And particularly men are not very good at building really sort of the kinds of deep relationships, vulnerable, connected, authentic relationships that we often crave. And so, life comes along and you've got kids and everything, you move out to the burbs, and suddenly those relationships that didn't have a lot of depth or intention to them all kind of go away. And you have no real friends, you have nobody to talk to. And that got me reflecting. And I had some friends, I had some good friends, but as I got to reflecting, I realized, most of actually the really, I would say, meaningful, purposeful, deep conversations I was having were with female friends. That seemed to be more comfortable for them. And I loved having those conversations, but I realized, like, why am I not having those relationships and conversations with my male friends? And I wanted to see how we could do that. And so I started thinking about it, and I decided, here's what I'm going to do. At the beginning of the year, actually, it was kind of a New Year's resolution type activity. I thought, I'm going to reach out to one of my male friends, somebody that, I have a friendship with, but that I want to have a much better, more meaningful, deeper relationship with. I'm going to reach out and ask them or invite them to go on that journey with me, sort of express this intention that I want to have a better relationship with them, and that I would like to invest some time in the upcoming year to spend more time with them with intention, right? Getting together on a regular schedule to have, some real conversations. And I did. And I've repeated that now, like, every year for the past 5 or 6 years. Each year I have added one more to the list, and I will make that invitation. And then, and most of these are people that, I can see in person, face to face, because they live near me. In some cases, there are people that don't, that I know have been with face to face, but don't live that close to me anymore. You can do it via Zoom or phone calls or whatever as well, if you do it with intention. But it's been incredible, right? The relationships that I've developed and that continue to develop are so meaningful. And I feel so lucky and fortunate and grateful to have these relationships. And so it's worked, but it's an investment and it's intention. And I had to be the one to reach out. And so what that means in terms of lessons, I guess, that you might take from that, or what I might offer up, is just that I would encourage you to think about your relationships, or think about the relationships that you would like, or what you would want your relationships to look like, where you want them to be deeper or different. And then think about what action you could take to make that happen. Maybe it's reaching out to a friend that you used to be close with, but you've kind of drifted apart because of life or because of whatever, reaching out and saying, hey, I miss you, and I'd like to make an intentional commitment to getting reconnected. Would you be interested in that? It might be your spouse. Maybe it's with your spouse. You feel like ships passing in the night because life, all the things, whether it's with kids or whether with work or whether it's whatever. And you invite them, like, I would like to intentionally have more time for conversation. Maybe you schedule regular date nights or coffees, or you sign up for a class to learn something together to kind of find a way to reconnect. I don't know what it might be. But I've found that nearly everyone I have conversations with is craving more connection, is craving more, like, real, authentic, healthy relationship with other people. And that need is there. It's palpable. But what I've also found to be true is that most people either won't do anything about it or don't know how to do anything about it to actually make something happen. And so if you're waiting around for someone else to reach out to you, it's not coming, right? That's not going to happen. And so I would encourage you, stop waiting, take action. Take action. So I hope that's helpful. Those are two kind of things that I've been thinking a lot about lately, in terms of my own personal relationships, that I thought I could offer up for you to maybe noodle on and see if there's anything in there that would speak to you. This webcast is sponsored by my longtime friends at Inspiring Workplaces. Now, if you are someone who's working to create an engaging and inspiring workplace for your employees, and of course you are, that's why you're here, then listen up. Inspiring Workplaces is a global community of tens of thousands of HR and employee experience professionals that you can join for free. As a member, you will gain access to thousands of articles and videos and podcasts and events that will help you change the world by changing the world of work. They are also home to the Inspiring Workplaces Awards that recognize the best workplaces in the world. You can learn about the application process at their website. So please go visit inspiring-workplaces.com to learn more and to join the community. That's inspiring-workplaces.com. Okay, so now let's take a minute and just think about how we might bring these lessons to work, because that's what we do here: better relationships, better work. So I'm going to start with the first one. So what does it mean? What does it look like to be more open to connection at work? So be open to connection is the thing we're really after, or the thing that I was relearning, I guess, recently. So a couple thoughts I have would be, I think it can be as simple, if I think about my own journey and experience, it might be as simple as just being more curious about the people you work with. Kind of like, I've just tried to be more curious when I'm out in the world of other people, observing other people, and thinking about like the choices that they make about how they showed up in the world today, or how they decided to come to the store or whatever, but just not judgmental, just curious, like questioning, curiosity. So at work, like being curious about the people you work with, even if you've worked with them for a long time, just finding a bit more curiosity, observe them. Maybe you ask them questions, try to learn something new about the people you work with, because one new piece of data can shift your perspective on someone. So I think what my experience has been, and I think you will find, is that just by being more curious about others, you will find that they often then get more curious about you. And that is a recipe for a better relationship, or at least an opportunity to make a different kind of connection, or a better connection. I think the other thing that, what I talked a little bit about is just really thinking about the kind of vibes you're putting off, right? How are you presenting? What does your presence look like in terms of how you're showing up with people? Whether you go into an office, whether you go into, a workplace setting of some sort, whether in healthcare, manufacturing, whatever it is, you go to someplace, or whether maybe this is your digital footprint, even how you're sending emails. But just think about, what kind of vibe am I putting them off? Am I putting off a vibe of friendly openness? Sure, I'd love to talk to you. Or am I putting off a vibe of aloofness, or sort of distance, being reserved? Like, what am I putting off? And that's what I realized, is the world was responding to me exactly the way I was sort of exactly in alignment with the invitation I was offering. When I offered a different invitation, the world started responding differently. And I think you would find that at work as well. As a leader, I think one of the things you can do, if you happen to lead a team, or you manage a team, one of the really powerful things you can do is just create opportunities for people to learn about each other. And so one of the favorite tips that I offer around that is, it's a technique I've seen used to great effect in different teams, is I call it just the question of the day approach. And it basically is that, at the beginning of a meeting, and we all have team meetings, and meetings generally are, where all kinds of good intentions go to die, but let's use it for something positive. If we're going to meet, let's build some connection. And one of the ways you can do that is at the beginning of each meeting, having a question, sort of a universal question that everyone could react to. So think about things like, where's home for you? Or what is your favorite food? Or, where's the most beautiful place that you've ever visited? Or favorite childhood memory, whatever, right? Something that probably everyone could come up with something. And you open the meeting with that question, and you let everybody respond. And maybe in time, if you understand what the questions look like, you can start handing the responsibility for coming up with the question to different folks on the team who could bring forth the question if they understood generally what the parameters are. But it's a really cool opportunity because when you ask people to do that around the table, they start to hear other people sharing things that might trigger them to be like, wow, I would have never guessed that person has this same interest that I do, or they grew up in the same place that I did. I didn't know that. Suddenly the opportunity for a connection is born. So that is one of the things you can do as a leader. So that's be open, or some thoughts about how to be more open. On the second topic, how to invest in relationships, how to sort of take action to foster relationships. This one is just something you have to kind of make the commitment to do, because here's the most powerful truth in all this. I hinted at this earlier, is that regardless of how you feel about your job today, whether you love it or you hate it or something in between, if you invest in building better relationships at work, finding some work friends, whatever, it will at a minimum help you enjoy your job more. Right? Gallup has tons of data that shows that making friends at work has all kinds of incredible positive benefits, and most directly, it's benefits for you. Same thing can happen if you lead a team, helping your team get connected to each other and build friendships in the team. That is beneficial for you because they enjoy their job more. It helps boost all kinds of things that we want at work. So, but on top of just enjoying your job more, if you're strategic about building relationships, if you're thoughtful about building relationships more broadly across the organization, this is what social gravity was kind of about when we were writing. This can actually help you build a network that can propel you forward, help you be more effective, help your ability to get things done enhanced. So lots of benefit to investing in relationships. So what does that actually look like? And I think a couple of things for me that always worked. And this is, I'll remind you, right? Don't wait. This is take action. You're going to have to be the one that you decide to invest, and then you're going to have to move. You're going to have to be the one that reaches out. And there were a couple of things that I used to do when I was inside of an organization. It looks different today. I do similar things today, but if you're inside of an organization, I found it the easiest thing was to reach out to people and invite them to coffee or invite them to lunch and simply just say, you know what, we do some work together, or we've been on these projects together, but I don't feel like we've ever really had the opportunity to sit and talk, to get to know each other a little bit. So I'd love to have coffee, get to know you, learn a little bit more about what you do. I just thought that would be valuable. And if you want to learn more about me, I'm happy to share. And I found that nearly everyone says yes to this invitation. Almost everyone. I mean, there'll be a few out there that say no, and that's fine. Go on to the next one. If they don't want to have coffee, that's fine. And I think if you have this conversation, and it's a conversation, it's kind of like, think about it like a first date. If it goes well and you guys really enjoy the conversation, by the end of the conversation, you just say, hey, this was really fun. I really enjoyed talking. Would you be game to do this again in a month or so? Just to come back together and talk a bit more. Most people will say yes, and bam, you're off to the races, right? Pretty simple. The other thing that I found to be really helpful was for the people that you either do work together frequently, you have to work together. Maybe you're on the same team or you're peers and you have a lot of overlap in things, or people that you should be working together more closely, or you need to or want to have a better relationship with. A lot of times, but you already do some work with, but building that relationship would be valuable, is asking them to kind of have a standing meeting or a standing lunch or a standing coffee just for purposes of check-in. And I've always had several of those. I still have those today, and they're super valuable. You have them on the calendar. We didn't always talk about, sometimes we talked about work, sometimes we talked about personal stuff, vacations, family, whatever it was, depending on where we were in our lives. But the time, that investment of time, really was what helped the relationship move forward. And in every case, it helped improve the relationship, because no longer are you just, transactional coworkers. You're now actually building some relationships and building some friends. So there it is. I hope that you have enjoyed this. solo episode. I will be back next week with more interviews, more amazing insights from some more amazing people. But I hope today was valuable. And if you have any thoughts or questions to share, please feel free to do that in the comments or reach out to me directly. So that's it for today. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. More importantly, I hope you learned something from the episode that can help you right away. Now, if you'd like to reflect on what you can learn from your own healthy, positive relationships to make work better, I've included a link in the description below where you can access and download what I call the relationship reflection exercise. This includes the same questions that I ask each of my guests to reflect on prior to our conversation on the webcast. Also, if you found today's episode valuable, I'd ask 3 quick favors of you. Number 1, please like the episode. By liking the video and adding a comment if something spoke to you or stood out to you as really significant, you give me some great and valuable feedback, but you also help others find the video. I'd also ask you to subscribe to the channel. That does 2 important things. 1, it makes sure that you won't miss any upcoming episodes, and it sends me the message that you like the kind of content that I'm creating here. And finally, please share this video with someone who you think might benefit. What better gift can you give someone than the gift of better relationships and a better work experience? I'm really grateful that you were here today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.